From Washington, D.C., welcome to the Harness Racing Alumni Show. I'm Freddie Hudson, and I'm here today with Trade Martin and Bob Marks.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show with your host, Freddie Hudson and Trade Martin.
This week's Alumni Show is brought to you by Bill Houghton, insuring standardbreds and farms for over 40 years. Bill knows the ins and outs of equine insurance. Make sure your equine investments are protected. Call or text Bill at 954-655-5547. That's 954-655-5547. Call Bill now. Joining us today is Marty Irby, the Executive Director of Animal Wellness Action and one of Washington, D.C.'s top lobbyists, who was just honored by Queen Elizabeth for the work that he does with horse protection. Today we are going to discuss an amendment that we worked on last week that could bring an end to horses being shipped and exported for slaughter. Marty, welcome back on our show.
Yes, thank you, Freddie, Bob, Trade. Great to be here again with you.
Marty, tell us about last week's amendment and how it came about and what was done.
Well, some years ago, back in 2014, when I worked on Capitol Hill for Congressman Ed Whitfield from Kentucky, we made an attempt to try to ban horse slaughter and the transport of horses for horse slaughter in the highway bill. And at that time, we had an amendment that was a floor amendment. The House parliamentarian, basically the person who says what's in order and what's out of order, said, look, this amendment's not going to be in order because you can't ban horse slaughter. It would have a referral to USDA and possibly some of the other jurisdictions. And if you had just tried to ban the transport of horses for the purposes of slaughter, that probably would have gone through. We were past the deadline for amendments at that time. And so for 7 years, I've had this idea in my head, just waiting for the right time to pounce, knowing that President Biden's big infrastructure package is a priority and that it was coming down the pipeline. I've been talking with folks about this and socializing it a little bit. And I know you and I talked. And so last Monday, we found out they were going to do what they call a markup hearing in the Transportation Committee on the House side that would bring that INVEST Act, is the name of it, the infrastructure package, forward through the House of Representatives. And it only had 48 hours notice. I honestly thought we had a few more weeks. But miraculously, we were able to find a sponsor for an amendment, Congressman Troy Carter, a brand new Democrat elected just a month or so ago to replace Congressman Cedric Richmond. Congressman Carter is from around New Orleans, Louisiana. And in Louisiana, you might, I'm sure, be aware that there's a huge kill pen in Bastrop, Louisiana. So we talked to him. He committed to lead the amendment. And then our good friend that you introduced me to, Michelle Crawford, was so kind to get Congressman John Katko on from New York, a Republican, to be the lead Republican on the amendment, as well as Brian Fitzpatrick that we got from Pennsylvania. So we had a really well-balanced bipartisan amendment that was put forth. And in less than 24 hours, thanks to your help, Michelle's help, and many other groups, we were able to get 220 groups, organizations, and horse-related businesses and rescues in support of the amendment, including the U.S. Harness Racing Alumni Association, Michelle's Farm, Stacy and Arthur Hancock, who's raised 3 Kentucky Derby winners, and even PETA. And so we had the far ends of the spectrum, you might say, when we're talking about people involved in pushing against horse slaughter together, and brought that amendment forth. It had a worthy discussion. There were some issues that arised with a couple of different people, but the chairman, Peter DeFazio from Oregon, committed to working with us and Congressman Carter and Katko and Fitzpatrick over the next few weeks to try to get this in what they call the manager's amendment, which would be a final amendment to the bill before it hits the House floor. So I feel really good about it. It's definitely still in play, and we're just grateful for all of your support and everyone else's, Freddie.
All right, and also a shout-out to Jeff Doral because he brought in the Meadowlands, Vernon Downs, and Tioga. We also ran into some obstacles. Did you want to care to explain about that a little bit?
Yes, unfortunately, and this is the third time this has happened since last July, the Humane Society of the United States and Humane Society Legislative Fund, where I actually used to work, brought some opposition to this amendment. I still don't really know why. I think it was probably more because they weren't involved in putting this together or creating it or drafting it, but they expressed to members of the committee that they had strong concerns about the amendment. And honestly, in Congress, I hate to say this, but that's kind of code word for we don't want this to go through. We have our reasons, but we're keeping those to ourselves for now. So it was very unfortunate that we had them try to basically derail this thing, and they did temporarily derail it. But I think that if we get enough people contacting them in support of this and really pressing them hard, that we might be able to get them on board. The chairman definitely wants to help us, as I said before. We had a couple of other little things, nothing I think that is going to stop us. Congresswoman Dina Titus from Nevada, who's been a longtime horse protection champion and a great person on this issue, she pointed out that we did not include wild burros, donkeys, and mules, and that was an oversight. So that's something that's easily corrected by inserting the word equines instead of just horses. And then we had some issues with the Department of Transportation on the matter of enforcement. I think that we can overcome those easily with a little bit of language change. I think their concern was not so much the enforcement at the actual border of Canada and Mexico where these horses are shipped out, but perhaps from state to state within the 50 states and what that enforcement mechanism would be. So I feel really good about it. We're continuing to work with the sponsors, and we could really have a good shot at ending the transport of horses for slaughter across these United States into other countries in a matter of weeks. And then once this bill gets through the House, then we'll have to, of course, go to work on the U.S. Senate, which is a little bit more difficult. But we've got a lot of history on the record with the Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer being against horse slaughter, and even Senator Mitch McConnell, now the Minority Leader, being against horse slaughter and helping us with a year-over-year de facto ban we call the horse slaughter defund. So things are looking up if we can get the Humane Society in line.
Well, I'm going to go now. If let's say we got this bill passed, wouldn't that stop kill buyers from being able to get USDA hip tags, hip number tags?
Yes, it should. And, you know, what the goal is, since we don't have horse slaughter on U.S. soil currently, but it's, like I said, a year-over-year de facto ban that we have to keep lobbying for each year, they're still shipping these horses over to Canada and Mexico. This would prevent them from being able to get those tags from USDA, and the cost would go up dramatically, so it would not be worth their while to make an attempt to go ahead and transport these horses for the purposes of slaughter. There would be the cost in transportation that would increase, and then there would also be the potential fines that would be levied upon them. Someone might take a trailer of 5 horses that are going to slaughter and end up with a $50,000 fine. If they're caught, they're not going to, the risk is just not worth the reward. So that's what we're trying to do, is create a deterrent for these guys not to do this.
Good plan. And now let's see, what's the next step in the House?
Well, what we have now is that the bill has made it through the committee. The chairman has the discretion of his own to do what they call a manager's amendment. It's basically a block of amendments, little changes, sometimes technical things, sometimes things that didn't get worked out in the committee, and they file that manager's amendment just before the bill goes to the House floor. Of course, the chairman would have to agree on its inclusion, and the leaders of the committee as well, but it's pretty much up to their discretion. And once we see that come forth, I think we'll see something in the manager's amendment. It may look a little bit different than what we had first proposed. I'm sure we'll have, of course, the word equines inserted instead of horses, like I said. And then I think we'll have a better definition of what the enforcement mechanism is and what those penalties might be. Currently, what we were looking at was a U.S. statute and code that cited up to $10,000 in fines. That's what my goal would be, to get a penalty of $10,000 per horse per incident. But even if it's $5,000 and it's a little less, I still think that having that deterrent that someone might have to pay $25,000 to $50,000 or $100,000 when they're taking a trailer load of horses over the border is going to prevent them from doing it. So we're looking at today is June the 14th. I think probably by around the end of the month, we'll see that bill hit the House floor. Could be next week, could be the following week from what staff are telling me. And then, of course, we'll see a vote in the U.S. House, and things will move on over to the U.S. Senate.
And are you going to need more support for people contacting the House or the committee members?
Absolutely, we will. We actually have a form that I know you may want to share around with your list, or people can sign up and add their organization or equine business or rescue's name to the list of supporters. Like I said, we have 200, I think it's 227 right now. I'd love to get 300, 350 organizations. I mean, that is very strong. Rarely do you ever have that many organizations supporting something. So the more support that we have from the equine world and the animal protection space, the better off we're going to be, because we also face a little bit of an uphill battle with some of the agriculture interests, like the Cattlemen's Association. Basically, they have for a long time been pro-slaughter because they have this argument that I'm not buying, but their argument is that it's a slippery slope, and once we're going to stop the slaughter of horses, there's a movement to go on to other animals. I think that's a little far out there, but we still have some opposition there. But fortunately, with the dynamics in the committee on both sides of the aisle, I think the voice that we have and the equine industry itself will really outweigh that, because that's who's really directly impacted and affected.
Okay. And my last question for you. You have an event planned on July 2nd with actress Katherine Heigl. Can you tell us a little bit about that? And do you think she's going to be lobbying with us in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I will. Yes, that just came about near the end of the week last week. So we're doing a rally in Salt Lake City, Utah, on the steps of the state capitol. Katie's been terrific to deal with. She's written letters to the committee about this particular issue and about the wild horses. And there's a band out there, a herd called the Anarchy Wild Horses. They're very famous, and the BLM, Bureau of Land Management, is set to round up about 80% of them in mid-July. So we're going to have her. We're potentially going to have some other celebrities that are going to be there with us, and I know we're going to have advocates from all over the country rallying on the courthouse steps to really make a statement that the BLM needs to stop this roundup. And then we're going to travel with the press and the photographers on out to the site where the Anarchy horses actually live and go see the horses there ourselves. As you may know, I've been working also on a documentary called Wild Beauty, Mustang Spirit of the West, with the director and producer of Disney's Black Beauty that was released last year. They're going to be there with us working also to get some good footage for the documentary that we're working on. So I think it's going to be a very high-profile event. I think we're going to have a lot of positive press and get the message out there. And I know that Katie Heigl really wants to help us in lobbying. I don't know physically if she'll be here in the near future. She's actually filming a show she has on Netflix called Firefly Lane that just got renewed for a second season. But at least via email, telephone, and correspondence, I know she's going to be lobbying with us to protect the wild horses and end horse slaughter on U.S. soil.
Not great. And, hey, Trey, do you have anything you want to bring in here?
Everything sounds good to me. It sounds like you got everything under control, Marty. That's great.
I appreciate you guys. You're always so great to talk with. I enjoy this show so much. And Freddie, you, Bob, and Trey have done so much good work. I don't think I've been on since the Horse Racing Integrity and Safety Act was signed into law, but because you got the message out there and the word out there, that really helped us get it over the goal line. And I know you continue to press for people in the harness racing industry to get on board and support that. And we really appreciate that and all that the three of you do.
No, thank you. We have that Zoom meeting taking place this upcoming Friday. That should be real interesting. We have a bunch of harness trainers coming on this meeting. It's going to be with USADA and Travis, and he's also bringing Dr. Muir back on. So that should be a very positive meeting.
How about
Bob?
Good.
I'm looking forward to it.
Bob, what do you think?
I think everything is great, and I think it's time to close the show. It's a great show.
Okay. If you're buying or selling your home, Joe Rico is your go-to guy. Joe has been representing buyers and sellers on Long Island for 30 years. He is an expert in all types of sales. Don't settle for average. Call or text Joe Rico today at 516-524-4870. That's Joe Rico at 516-524-4870.
Freddie, you got his email address?
Yes, I do. That's Joe Rico, C21@yahoo.com. Marty, thank you so much for being on the show. This is Freddie Hudson, and on behalf of the Harness Racing Alumni Show, thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune in next week.
The Harness Racing Alumni Show